Persona 3 is a pretty mixed bag of a game to me. While for the most part the base game did provide me with a story I liked, there were some definite growing pains with the adaptation of full 3D when it came to how they handled the gameplay of the series. That, on top of the somewhat underdeveloped parts of the story, really created an experience while I really loved, had me split. A fair bit of the stuff I had issue with, such as character revivals and such that took away from the theming of the game, came from the expansion for Persona 3 titled FES. A lot of my criticisms towards those aspects of the game very much will be carrying over to the topic at hand I will be discussing today. Welcome back to my Persona Retrospective Review Series. This is Sleep, and today we are covering the epilogue and mini-campaign for Persona 3 FES titled The Answer. This is going to be a rough one, so let's get into it. The Answer is a continuation of the story of the journey a few weeks after the death of the main character. During the opening sequence, it is blatantly told that the protagonist peacefully died in his sleep while he was resting with Aigis on the school's rooftop. A confused Cease is now in the midst of mourning over their friend dying now that the school year has concluded. The dorm is to be closed down soon as well. The characters are pretty distant from each other now, and it kind of shows how much of this team really wasn't the absolute best of friends and heavily relied on the main character to bring them together. This all leads up to the team wanting to go their own separate ways in life, but during their last dinner party together in a weird twist of fate, the Cease members discover that they are trapped within the dorm and that the day March 31st is going on a constant loop similar to the movie Groundhog Day. When the X-Team discovers this, a large door-like hole opens in the floor of the dorm and Cease is attacked by an anti-shadow weapon similar to Aigis named Metis. In the midst of fighting Metis to protect her friends, Aigis' persona Athena transforms into Orpheus and gains the protagonist's wildcard ability. Aigis is able to subdue Metis, whose actions were an attempt to end the time skip and save Aigis, who she calls her sister. Underneath the dorm is the Abyss of Time, the cause of the time skip. The Abyss contains 7 doors, the insides of which contain multi-floor dungeons similar in design to Tartarus. It is in these areas that this game's combat takes place. This, with the change of the protagonist to Aigis, we now have the basic setup of The Answer, and honestly, I find the setup to be alright. But that's where my compliments for this expansion drop off, along with my enjoyment when it comes to playing through this, because if you couldn't tell by now, I really fucking hate this expansion. One of the big reasons for this being, after this setup, you literally get no plot outside of minor flashback scenes and the ending for literally the rest of the expansion, leaving you to be stuck in some of the worst gameplay the series has to offer for the next 15 hours. Yes, you fucking heard me, 15 fucking hours. Oh, and if you think you'll only be dealing with another Tartarus game, you're sorely mistaken. Let me put the Abyss of Time into perspective for you. Imagine going through the entirety of Tartarus, but the game designers wanted to grab your nuts, put a fucking hook through them, and had said nuts attached to a chain, attached to a car, and drove at like 90 miles per fucking hour through the entirety of the Sahara Desert. Let me explain why this is. In the Persona series, there's generally a layout a lot of common encounters will have, where it benefits spread moves so every single battle won't be tedious. The Answer completely throws this design philosophy out of the window and sets up encounters so 2 enemies will be weak to the same type of move, while 1 enemy will reflect it, thus punishing the player for wanting to use spread moves. This increases the length of each battle, making basic encounters feel like a fucking chore in new areas, and making general grinding in an RPG not fun. Some of these issues were apparent in later parts of Persona 3, but that game actually had a structure where you wouldn't get bored due to the social link and everyday life elements of the game. Because of The Answer lacking these elements in the end, the general gameplay loop of the game becomes extremely unfun. This leaves the only possible saving grace for this expansion in the hands of the story, so let's discuss if that part of the game succeeds or not. Essentially, at the top of each of the 7 dungeons that make up the Abyss of Time, Cease will witness an event from the past of each member. After seeing several of these flashbacks, Cease concludes that the events shown in each door relate to the trauma or events that led up to the members awakening to their personas. My issue with how this was tackled comes more with the fact that it's fan service rather than character or story development, which in turn makes this expansion feel like a waste of time. This is a huge problem, as it removes a lot of the motivation for the player to grind through the less than subpar gameplay. The only real plot comes at the end of the 7th and last dungeon. At the top of the 7th and final door, Cease fights a shadow-like version of the protagonist Makoto Yuki. After defeating the shadow, each of the members of Cease obtain a key. By combining the keys, they would be able to end the time skip and leave the dorm. However, Metis presents Cease with an alternative. Instead of unlocking the front door of the dorm, they can use the keys to travel back in time, which in turn they can fight against Nyx and the death of the protagonist. This would completely negate the impact of the ending of Persona 3 and go against the themes of death and growth that come with it. Yukari wants this alternative because she wants another chance to save their protagonist, which Mitsuru only supports her on because she's her good friend. This completely goes against Yukari's motivation in life and the development she goes through in the journey because of her father's death. This comes out of fucking butt-fuck nowhere, and it's just fucking awful, holy shit! Luckily, Aigis and the rest of the team feel like this is too dangerous and completely goes and disrespects the fucking sacrifice the protagonist made in the answer. But then they all fucking fight for the key anyway, so whoops for character development! Whoops for characters contradicting themselves for no fucking reason. God. I need to calm down. Moving on, Aigis, Metis, and Fuka fuse the fragments from the defeated Cease members into the final key. This is when Yukari, in one final move of desperation, attempts to steal the key from Aigis, but proceeds to fail like a fucking idiot. Here she breaks down and finally admits defeat and the party comforts her. With her resolution re-strengthened, she decides to respect the decision of Aigis and the protagonist by leaving the past the way it is. After this, the team discovers a third new door in the abyss of time. The group enters the door without using the key to travel to the moment the protagonist sealed Nyx from the world. It is then revealed that the purpose of the seal created by the protagonist was not to seal Nyx away, but to prevent humanity from calling out to Nyx and bringing about the fall once more. The will of mankind wishes for death constantly and rebirths a monster called Erebus that summons Nyx to destroy the world. Erebus' contact with Nyx is what causes the fall. Cease realizes that the wishes that created Erebus also came from them, and so they fight it and are able to defeat it. Mitsuru points out that Erebus will return regardless, as humans will never stop wishing for death. After breaking the time loop and exiting through the front door of the dorm with the final key, Metis, Aigis, and the rest of Cease are summoned to the Velvet Room. Here they learn Metis is a manifestation of a part of Aigis' personality. Distraught over the death of the protagonist, she no longer wanted to live like a human and wished to return to being a machine. After being set free from the abyss of time, Aigis has a change of heart and decides to continue to attend school, something she had not chosen to do earlier.
I'm still kinda sad to leave this place behind.
Yes, but change is part of life.
Hey, I guess, if you're gonna live in the dorms, you wanna be my roommate? I mean, you need one, right? But hey, no need to be so formal. We are friends, aren't we?
Yeah, you're right.
Overall, the answer is probably one of the most messy, annoying, and unfun pieces of media to come out of the Persona franchise, period. It's a complete betrayal of the game it's an expansion of. It backpedals on development with its characters and creates some of the most unfun gameplay in this entire series. I would not recommend this expansion to anyone when it comes to playing through it, and the best way to experience this story is probably just watching the cutscenes on YouTube. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed a little more critical review of a game in this series, and I thank you guys for watching. This is Sleep, and I'm out. See ya!